What's this other jet doing? What's this other jet doing? Holy fuck!
Oh my God! Oh my God! Jesus fucking Christ!
Don't touch it.
Oh my God!
I mean, when you look at it, the building has collapsed. That tower just came down.
This is clearly, the way the structure is collapsing, this was the result of something that was planned. It's not accidental that the first tower just happened to collapse and then the second tower just happened to collapse in exactly the same way. How they accomplished this, we don't know.
We made it outside, we made it about a block.
We made it at least 2 blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, instead of popping out.
It was if they had detonated. They were planning to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down. I was watching it and running.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
The third tower fell on September 11th.
World Trade Center 7, a 47-story skyscraper, was not hit by a plane.
Although the official explanation is that fire brought down Building 7.
Over 1,200 architects and engineers have looked into the evidence
and believe there is more to the story.
The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fires.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
I do believe that it is the first time in history that fire has ever melted steel. I do believe that it defies physics for the World Trade Center Tower 7, Building 7, which collapsed in on itself. It is impossible for a building to fall the way it fell without explosives being involved. World Trade Center 7. 7, miraculously, the first time in history, steel was melted by fire.
Saw the big hubbub going on around Building 7. Walked around it. I saw a hole. I didn't see a hole bad enough to knock a building down, though. So, you know, yeah, there was definitely fire in the building, you know, but I didn't hear any indication that it was going to come down. And all of a sudden, the radios exploded, and everybody started screaming, "Get away, get away, get away from it." It was that moment, you know, get away. And I looked up, and things started peeling in on itself, and the whole time you're hearing boom, 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 boom. So, I think I know an explosion when I hear it, you know? I don't know, but that didn't sound like just a building falling down to me while I was running away from it. There's a lot of eyewitness testimony down there hearing explosions. I didn't see any reason for that building to fall down the way it did, and a lot of guys should be saying the same thing.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down.
The building is about to blow up. Moving back. There's a building about to blow up.
Just in the last few seconds, another building, building number 7, has collapsed. This is no small building, as you can see, at 47 stories. It would stand out in most American cities.
Did you know that a third tower fell on 9/11? At approximately 5:20 p.m. on September 11, 2001, World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed in 6.5 seconds from normal office fires, according to the government's final report.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
Later, the government finally admitted that Building 7 collapsed at the rate of free fall. So what's wrong with a building in free fall? What is free fall?
It's just like taking your car keys out and just dropping them. That's how fast the building came down, for over 100 feet.
This is high school physics. A building cannot do free fall with 40,000 tons of structural steel in its structural system without it being blown up.
The only way that a building can accelerate as it collapses is by having pre-engineered, precisely timed, and precisely placed explosives.
You don't need to be an engineer or an architect to see what happened to those buildings.
The most obvious hypothesis for anyone looking at the films is that the buildings came down because there was very carefully controlled demolition with high explosives that had been planted weeks, if not months, before.
9/11 claimed thousands of lives and touched millions more. It led us into 2 wars and was used to scale back our civil liberties and invade our privacy. But many people are beginning to question what we were told.
Zie je vanaf boven gaan? Nee, je gaat vanaf onder.
Die gaat vanaf onder, ja.
Toch?
Ja.
Ze hebben gewoon kolommen weggeblazen. Er is nagesprongen.
De verdiepingen gaan eerst.
Ja, en de rest zakt er gewoon in. Dus dit is controlled demolition.
Zeker weten?
Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dit heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Maar dit is ook op 11 september gebeurd.
Dezelfde dag?
Dezelfde dag.
Dezelfde dag? Weet je dat zeker?
Ja.
Was het zeker weten de 11e? Dat kan geen waar zijn.
7 uur nadat de World Trade Center naar beneden viel.
Ja? Het is vakwerk, zonder meer. We weten heel goed wat ze doen, die jongens. Ja, dat is vreemd. Dat is vreemd. Dat vind ik ook heel vreemd. Daar heb ik geen verklaring voor.
No steel frame high-rise has ever completely collapsed due to fire. How are we to understand this mysterious event?
High-rise buildings simply do not collapse due to fire. There has never been until 9/11 an experience where a high-rise building that was steel frame completely collapsed. There have been fires burned longer in similar structures without any collapse.
The fires, normal fires, are not hot enough to melt steel. Even if you were, for example, to use an unusual fuel like kerosene, you cannot achieve temperatures hot enough to melt steel.
Later in the day, when World Trade Center 7 collapsed, they had already showed us pictures of a few fires in that building, and I mean, they weren't even raging. And how could that cause a building to collapse as if it were imploded? Couldn't happen.
Final report on the destruction of World Trade Center Building 7. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, went out of its way to avoid investigating the use of explosives. Their sole rationale for not investigating explosive use was the supposed lack of sufficiently loud sounds.
This size blast would have produced an incredibly loud sound that was not recorded on videos of the collapse nor reported by witnesses.
On the basis of this artificial threshold of interest, they swept aside all evidence of actual explosions and concluded that no explosives contributed to the destruction of the building.
We did not find any evidence that explosives were used in the collapse of Building 7.
Yet there was voluminous evidence of explosions.
Here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
You heard explosions, like boom.
We just heard one more explosion. That's about the 4th one we've heard.
The symmetry is the smoking gun. It cannot happen that when you have asymmetric damage, you will get a perfectly symmetrical collapse.
The exterior columns on the outside as well as on the inside, at the bottom would have to be severed almost at the same time.
I worked for Controlled Demolition Incorporated, CDI, the top-rated explosives demolition firm in the world. As an explosives loader, my job was to place explosives in the buildings to prepare them for demolition. What I saw, it was a classic implosion. The center of the core, the penthouse area, starts to move first, and then the building follows along with it.
When it's all finished, the outside walls are piled one on top of the other right in the middle of the building. Just like a house of cards if it were coming down.
If explosives were involved, that would mean that the most obnoxious protesters in recent years are right.
If you hear the shouting, it's a group of demonstrators who've come. 9/11 was an inside job. Oh, get a life. Get a life. 9/11 was an inside job.
And what caught my eye is their claim that more than 1,300 architects and engineers examined the evidence about Building 7's collapse and disagree with the official report issued by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Among other key tenets, including several intelligence and law enforcement agencies, it also housed New York City's Emergency Operations Center, known as Mayor Giuliani's bunker.
Building 7 came down. It went into a sudden collapse across the full width and length of the building for 2.25 seconds, which amounted to 105 feet, or 8 stories, 8 13-foot tall stories. It was in full free-fall acceleration. That is impossible because in a natural collapse, columns would have to buckle. When columns buckle, there is a minimum resistance. It's asymptotic, if you know what that means. That means it never goes to zero. So it's impossible. You can't reach.
So here's what, I guess in layman's terms, to just get my hands here, Peter. So what he's saying is that the top floor collapses, hits the next floor, hits the next floor, hits the next floor. So it's bang, bang, the weight of the upper floors.
It would slow down. What I'm trying to say is it was in full free fall acceleration. All of its potential energy was being converted to motion.
Instead of what I just described, the thing just collapsed like a pancake.
It just came down.
And so what are you suggesting brought it down, Tony?
I'm suggesting there was some form of demolition devices in that building for 8 stories or more.
You think that the explosives brought down Building 7?
Some form of demolition device. I'm not pretending to know what it is. I am saying that it was in free fall acceleration.
All right, let me ask you this.
NAST admitted to that.
Okay, let me ask you this before I get to Dad, before I get to Bob here. We've all seen old, obsolete buildings and public housing in other places outlive their usefulness, being demolished by the professionals who can actually collapse a building right in its own footprint. That's what it looks like happened to Building 7. Do you believe that's what happened?
Yes, I do believe that's what happened.
And why do you think they're lying about it?
I don't really know all the details of why they're lying about it. I can't read their minds. All I can say is, scientifically, it's impossible for fire to have done what we see.
There's so many firemen, so many EMS workers, policemen who talk about the explosions. And I know you don't want to get into my son's, but I feel my son died from an explosion. I went to all the 9/11 Commission hearings. I've been researching this for 9 years.
So what do you want? Let's get to the bottom line before we're out of time.
I want truth. I've been lied to. I mean, it's beyond a reasonable doubt that the 9/11 Commission did not tell this story.
9/11 Commission barely mentioned Building 7, if at all.
I'm not done. I'm still a parent. I'm a parent who has an obligation to find out why my son was murdered. As far as this show and New York City, I want the investigation. That will not be sufficient enough.
Your wound. I get that.
And I'm going beyond that.
But it's the beginning.
Of course it's the beginning, but that's why I support this Building What campaign.
Bob McElvain, we thank you. Tony Zambati, thank you very much. It is an intriguing topic. I certainly am much more open-minded about it than I was, and it is because of the involvement of the 9/11 families and all these engineers and architects. Clearly, they know more than I do. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.